MMA into the Olympics. Khabib Nurmagomedov has set an initiative, come out publicly and said he's going to see to it that MMA gets into the Olympics, and he's going to meet with the president of the IOC to make his pitch. And I would love to see that get done. That's a tough one. It's a tough one in both directions. Let's start with keeping it out. Keeping it out is very hard to do. Okay. It's hard to do because the sport of pancration, which is what mixed martial arts is, it's the sport of pancration. I have the foggiest idea how they even got away with renaming themselves. Used to be in the Olympics. Now, not the modern Olympics. We've only heard about this through legend. We don't have any video of it, but it was the national sport of Greece, and Athens is where the first ever Olympic Games were. Was taken out in 1904 or after the 1904 games. But elements of pancration remain today. That is where Taekwondo, that is where boxing, that is where wrestling, that is where judo come in. Elements of pancration remain today, though the sport of pancration no longer does. So it's very hard to keep it out when it has such a history, and a history that elements of which are still contested to this day. There is nothing to bring validity to your sport faster or quicker or more definitively than having recognition from the IOC. There is no way to call something a sport, to go, that's not even a sport. If you're in the Olympics, can't happen, doesn't happen. That would be wonderful for MMA. Now, I don't know that MMA needs that. There's something called the UFC. There's something called Bellator. I don't know that it needs that like other sports do, but it would be a pretty cool thing. It would be very hard to get it in unless we can have a competitive architecture as to how are we going to do this, starting with what are they going to wear? Because the Olympics is a tournament, first and foremost. Every single sport is contested in a bracketed format. So if you are talking about doing MMA, then what are they going to wear? How are they going to fight 4 times in 3 days? Wrestling is 4 times in 1 day. They changed it. Boxing will use a week long, but it's still a tournament. And there's still 4 fights over a few days in each weight class. So there's ways to do it. Boxing does it. They're out there punching each other. They shorten the rounds. That's one thing they did that would be different from what your mind may think that you see on TV. It's not going to be 15 minutes a match. You're going to shorten it to 3 3s or 3 2s. They're going to go out and prove their point. If they can get a knockout, great. It's largely going to be a positional battle. Submissions are not going to come into play quite as much. That's okay. That's okay. But how are we going to do that, including the qualifications? And with what age groups? MMA in America, as we know it, is only recognized once you turn 18. You cannot go out in a competitive situation and compete in MMA without being 18. That's not true around the world. Russia, by example, we've seen the videos of it. Many people were disgusted, but they will have kids doing it. I also thought from an optics standpoint that was kind of hard to look at, but if it's either a sport or it's not, and if it is a sport, it has to be treated like the other sports. If a kid has dreams of being in the National Basketball Association, so he starts playing basketball at a young age, needs to be allowed to go and compete in basketball. I understand that fighting is different. I fully understand. I'm sharing with you, these are some of the problems. I don't even have an opinion or the answer to it. I'm suggesting for you that these things will need to be figured out if you're going to make a presentation to the president of the IOC. He's going to have a couple of questions, and they've tried to get pancration back. They've never called it mixed martial arts. They've always called it pancration. They've tried to get it back. And the IOC, as recently as 2016, which is the last time they looked at it, kicked the can, arguing we don't have a venue for it. That's how they got away with it. I mean, that's how they could just turn and walk away and say, we don't want to do that. That's okay. That's a part of life. You get answers. But it would be very interesting, particularly coming from somebody like Khabib, particularly if Khabib has a plan. If Khabib walks in and just goes, I really love mixed martial arts. Can we get it in the Olympics? No, I need a plan. Lay this out for me. How are we going to do it? Who's going to oversee this? Are athletic commissions who oversee MMA now, are they going to oversee amateur MMA? I don't think so. No. They would have something else to do that would halt and stop events in their tracks. So who is going to oversee it? Because we are still talking about minors, and we're talking about a pretty damn aggressive contact sport here. Are colleges going to get involved? I mean, right? If you're recognized from the International Olympic Committee, then there's no telling where that would end. I can remember when women's wrestling got in, 2004. But as soon as they got it, colleges started opening up and offering scholarships. It was now a recognized sport. High schools followed after that. They now have women's wrestling and women's wrestling teams and a state championship at the end of the season, followed by a women's national championship. I only offer for you, there's major power that the Olympics can bring, major power, major recognition. And I think that I would love to know what Khabib's motivation is. Is it just, I love the sport and I want to see more of it? I'm great with that answer. Is his idea of, hey, I love this sport and I want to see a way that amateurs can gain more experience before they're forced to get a license and jump right in there to the deep end? I don't know if that argument would hold up. I don't know if that's something we need to look at. I don't know what his motivation. I'm sharing with you. I would be curious, what is Khabib's motivation? Why specifically does he want this in the Olympics? I hope he gets what he wants. I would love to see it in the Olympics. I'd love to see the elements that still remain within the Olympics. I hope that Khabib gets his way. Getting an audience with the president of the IOC is something that president has only taken out of respect to Khabib. So in many ways, we got one big shot at this, and it's Khabib. Khabib grabbed this bull by the horns for whatever his motivation is, and he's going with it. I want Khabib to get his way, and I want him to be ready. I don't want him to say, I'm Khabib, you respect me, here's what my wish is. I want him to have a plan. And there is going to be conflicts to this plan, starting with who is going to oversee this. Let's start with that. I think that the U.S. would be at a major disadvantage for many of the reasons that I just laid out. Primarily, we are not allowed to compete until after you turn 18. That's probably something that's going to have to be looked at, and would be looked at if given recognition from the IOC.
Uncle Chael, Uncle Chael, there's no bad guy like Uncle Chael. Never lost, not even a round, undefeated, undisputed. Oh yeah, here comes the bad guy. Uncle Chael, Uncle Chael, there's no bad guy like Uncle Chael. Never lost, not even a round, undefeated, undisputed. Oh yeah, here comes the bad guy. Uncle Chael, Uncle Chael, there's no bad guy like Uncle Chael. Never lost, not even a round, undefeated, undisputed. Oh yeah, here comes the bad guy, Uncle Chael.